he told me again over the phone that he would sell the business to me, and he came back to me today and said, well, I could hear his wife in the background. They were kind of wavering on whether to sell the business or not, or to ask for more money from me, and he said call him back in a couple hours. So it's not a perfect path. It's pretty messy, but there's a lot of progress being made. So
that's it, man. And that's where we're gonna lean on. That's where we're gonna build on. Exactly. It doesn't have to be a perfect. I don't necessarily believe in perfection. Progress is the perfection. Is just building every single day, 1% better each day. Let's be real, guys. Look, sometimes it's less about what we know we need to do, and it's more about how do we execute and follow through, right? In other words, sometimes we know exactly what we should do and what we need to do, and yet we still don't do it. We still don't follow through. I think if you're being honest and transparent with yourself, you've probably experienced that. I know I have. As you're about to hear, Dan has. And that's where Dan finds himself today. And by the way, this podcast, this coaching call is zero judgment. Understand that my job as Dan's coach is to not only hold him accountable, but to guide him, help him get clarity, ask him the right questions so that he can get to the goal of closing and owning his first facility. And this is something that I see all the time. So I want to give you guys a sneak peek into a private conversation that Dan and I just had, because we were talking about like rescheduling the podcast. And because when we hopped on here and we were about to record, I'm like, hey, Dan, here's a quick recap of what we talked about last week. And I challenge you to track your time. I said, are you ready to talk about that? And Dan, what did you say? Let me introduce your voice into the podcast now.
I had an assignment to track it for 5 days, and I got 1 day into it, and day 2 didn't go as planned.
All right, so day 2 didn't go as planned. Dan got off track, and he wasn't able to follow through with what I challenged him with. And to be honest, we were going to reschedule, and we were going to say, hey, Dan, obviously we need you to follow through and execute here so that we can, each of these episodes builds on each other. And you, as the loyal listener and those watching, can follow along Dan's journey. And I said, you want to know what, man? Like, let's lean into this, because this is a real life challenge that people have. You know, why won't we put a spotlight on this challenge? First of all, it's going to help you, Dan, unlock what happens, but it's also going to help those that are following along on this journey and that are plugged into the Storage Wins podcast. It'll help them in their life and in their business, because at some point, you're going to say, I'm going to do something, but yet the execution doesn't follow. So on today's episode, I'm going to unpack, and we're going to unpack like what gets in the way when you have all the tools, you have the strategy and even the motivation, but the actions still don't happen. So if you have ever set goals, I don't care if they're storage goals or anything else, it could be a fitness goal, but you've set a goal and you've missed it, frustration can at sometimes creep in. And sometimes we start to like feel guilty and we start to like beat ourselves up. If you have ever experienced any of those emotions or thought about that, then this episode is for you. In fact, Dan, you don't know this, brother, but I had a coaching call with another Storage Wins member, and it was the same thing. It's like, I asked him and I said, hey, let's recap the wins, and then where are you getting stuck, right? Has the goal changed? If not, why aren't you following through? And he goes, Alex, man, I'm just not putting in the work. And he says, I know what I got to do. I know exactly what I have to do. I'm just not making the time because I have all these other things going on in my life and business. And so this is now the second time that this comes up in the same day. And guys, life is messy. Business is messy. It's not all perfect, you know, and this podcast, we promised from the beginning, we were going to be real, genuine, authentic, and not give you any fluff. And so far we have done that, and we're going to continue to do that. And so I don't really have an agenda for today's call other than to unpack what got in Dan's way. And I want you to listen and view this through the lens of, where have you made a commitment to yourself and to your business and to your family, to your team, to people that are relying on you? You knew what to do, but you didn't quite follow through. So now that you have that context, Dan, I'm gonna kind of now again bring you back into the conversation, brother. To set the stage, on the previous episode, we talked about essentially like give us a recap. I challenged you and I said, hey, where are you at in your business? And you had shared with us that you had gained traction with several leads that your virtual assistant had provided for you, and that's gone really well. You found the rockstar VA who's generating leads, setting up appointments for you, but you only ended up submitting 1 out of 3 offers that I had challenged you with on the previous episode. I think it was episode 9. You underwrote 2 out of 5 deals, and then I believe you had 7 out of 15 meaningful conversations. So I challenge you to have at least 3 meaningful conversations a day for an entire 5 days, and you hit half of that. That led to a conversation about a productivity gap, because I said, hey, where are you spending your time? And there was like, I don't know, 15 to 17 hours that you couldn't really account for. That is what led to me challenging you to track your time for an entire week every 15 minutes. And I also want to share with people that while you might not follow through on something, you have to ask yourself, hey, am I still making progress? And even though Dan didn't follow through on his end, and something tells me going forward he absolutely will, because there's a certain level of accountability built into this process. And I want you guys to help me hold down Dan accountable by finding him on social media and saying, hey, Dan, are you following through? And doing it with love, of course, zero judgment. It doesn't mean that you might not have made progress. And in Dan's case, I know he's made progress because he's knocking on the door of potentially locking up a deal that he's going to be wholesaling. We're going to leave that for another podcast episode. So make sure that you're subscribed so that you can continue to follow along on the journey here to see if we're going to be able to get Dan his first deal by the deadline that we set at the beginning of the season. So with that being said, now that we've kind of set the stage and we have recapped everything, brother, okay, let's be direct, real, and honest, and as transparent as you could possibly be. You started the exercise. What happened after day 1?
Yeah. Day 1 went well. I had a couple interruptions through the day. The week just got away from me. I wasn't able to focus as much on self-storage, and the days just kind of passed by one by one, and before I knew it, it was the end of the week, and I was like, what's that other thing I was supposed to be doing all week? And it was tracking my time. So yeah, okay. Didn't go as planned.
All right, man. So look, here's a question I have for you. Looking back on that now, what did you learn from that experience? Like, as you reflect back now that I'm like kind of putting you on the spot, what can you take from that can help you moving forward?
I know you say what gets measured gets managed, or I've heard that a number of times, and that's why there are KPIs to track and get a sense of how you're performing and where you can improve and what's going well, and trying to keep track of calls and offers and everything, and then trying to keep track of time. It starts to get jumbled in my mind to keep track of everything, and as I've started to increase the volume of offers I've been making, it's become more challenging to keep on top of them all.
Okay.
And it's just caused me to kind of lose track of some things. Like you said, it gets messy sometimes in business, and I found that to be the case.
Yeah.
And I found it's been hard to keep on top of everything as it's picked up a bit.
Yeah, man. Yeah, look, and I'm actually hearing that there's in the midst of the chaos and the messiness is what oftentimes is revealed, the systems that are missing or broken that we need to focus on. And so, Number 1, don't beat yourself up, give yourself some grace, and make sure that when you say you're going to do something, you follow through, because that's the kind of reputation that first of all, that you do have, by the way, because I know several people that know you, and you show up and give generously week in and week out. I mean, you host within our Storage Wins community, you host these underwriting calls and you invite everybody in our community to come in, and you've been so giving and helpful to people in the Storage Wins community. So, and you wouldn't show up week in and week out and say you were going to show up if you weren't the type of person that followed through. So this is an anomaly for you, by the way. And I think it's very real and honest for you to come on the podcast and share, hey, I don't have an excuse. Things got in the way. It got jumbled up. I forgot. So what that tells me is that right now there's an opportunity to improve the system. So you have had more opportunities come into your world ever since you finally made the decision to hire the virtual assistant, which is something we talked about early on in your journey. You finally took that leap. You found the right person. And now, I think you even said within the last couple of weeks, I think, like, I have more opportunity than I know what to do with. Right. And what that tells me is that there's time, like Michael Gerber talks about, where we need to be in the business, working in it, but we also need to carve out some time to work on the business. And right now, you're so in it that you haven't given yourself an opportunity to work on the business and start to identify, hey, where do I have cracks in the boat? Where are the holes? Where's water coming in through? And right now, what I'm seeing is that you have a good problem in that you have leads coming in, but I'm hearing that there's not a great system for tracking that lead flow, for following up. My guess is if we looked at your CRM and we looked at your database of leads, there's probably some sellers that you should have probably followed up with that maybe deserve a follow-up that you haven't. Would you say that's accurate?
No doubt. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So I want to keep this episode short and sweet because if you've been following along this journey, these have been some pretty long podcasts, and that's with good reason because there's been a lot to dive into as I'm coaching Dan and as we're opening up and having you walk alongside him on this journey. So first thing, Dan, that I want you to take away from is let's hit the reset button, right? Just because we set a goal, if we don't accomplish it, like what do? You know, you fall down 7 times. What's that quote? I think it's a Dwayne Wade quote. You get back up the 8th time. That's what we're going to do here is, okay, you committed to do something. You didn't follow through. Number 1, let's hit the reset button. Let's recommit. Number 2, it doesn't mean that you're not making progress because you certainly are. All right. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But I want to hear it from you. Will you recommit and follow through to track your time for the next week so that we can see where you are spending time and you can account for all the hours in your day? We don't want you to be like that leaf on a windy day that you have no idea where it's going to go. You ever seen a baseball, like a knuckleball pitcher? Like, hitters say it's one of the toughest pitchers to hit because you don't quite know where the ball's going. It's kind of like that leaf on a windy day. Don't be that. You need to be responsible for the time that you have because we only get 24 in a day. And in order to hit this goal you have, we got to be as efficient as possible with our time. And it's got to be time spent on the revenue generating activities. So I want to be able to ask you a month from now, hey, Dan, how did you spend your last 5 days? Or how did you spend your Tuesday when it came to your storage business? And you should be able to tell me, hey, Alex, I made this number of calls. I did this, I did that. And so can you recommit to track your time for the next week? So on the next episode, we can go back, we can have a conversation about it, and we can extract the nuggets from it.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys, you heard that. This is a legally binding contract with Dan's voice there. Obviously, I'm kidding, but help me hold him accountable. Dan, we'll talk about that on the next episode. All right. Number 2, I want to carve out some time. Now that we've identified at least, we can always squeeze like what's that saying? Like, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. The lemonade we've made from this episode is that, number 1, you recommitted. Number 2, we've identified, hey, there's some cracks in the dam. There's some leaks in the boat when it comes to how we're tracking our leads, how we're following up. In other words, not just the lead gen system, which you have dialed in with your VA, but it's like, how do we nurture those leads? How do we make sure that we're touching these leads every so often? So we're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode. I want to go ahead and tease you guys with that. That's going to be a good one. But for now, I want to keep this episode short and sweet. Give us some updates on the progress you've made over the course of the last week.
Over the course of what time frame? Sorry.
Yeah, like the last week to 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I've been working on the warmer leads that I've had good contact with, and I had a handful of them that are owners who have told me they're ready to sell. I've been requesting information from them about their businesses, revenue, unit mixes, time frames to sell, and signed an NDA for one, and they're working on getting the info to me. And
Sorry, Dan, what's for those listening that might not know, what's an NDA?
oh, sorry, a non-disclosure agreement that
Okay.
owners will send periodically to get you to promise not to expose or misuse the information they share with you about their business.
Okay.
And one of them, I made him an offer. He verbally accepted it on the phone, and I sent him an LOI, letter of intent in writing. And he told me again over the phone that he would sell the business to me. I spoke with him again today just to confirm. I had two different offer scenarios on the letter of intent.
Is it, by the way, Dan, is this the deal in North Carolina?
It is.
Okay, got it.
And so I spoke with him again today just to confirm which offer scenario out of the two that I put on the LOI that he wanted, so I could have the contract written up for him. And he came back to me today and said, well, I could hear his wife in the background. They were kind of wavering on whether to sell the business or not, or to ask for more money from me. And he said, call him back in a couple hours. So I'll call him again today and hopefully have good news from that conversation. I have another call planned for this afternoon with another lead that I had good conversations with, made him an offer, and I'm waiting for a reply back. So I have high hopes for that phone call as well. But these are all leads that the VA brought to me, and it's a lot of them that I've been nurturing lately and that have been keeping me busy.
Yeah. Okay. A lot to share here, so I'm gonna keep it condensed, so that we can continue to build here moving forward. So thanks for the updates, Dan. First off, congrats, because this is a win, and you know I'm all about celebrating the wins. I mean, you submitted an offer, which is one of your non-negotiables, is submitting at least one offer a week, if not three. That's one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, that I'm always challenging and holding everybody in our community. Is we want to make sure that we're sending out offers on a weekly basis. That is what gives us an opportunity to put a storage facility under contract and ultimately buy it. I always share this, and you've heard me say this numerous times, Dan. We cannot control if we buy a storage facility. However, we can control our output. In other words, the actions that we can control. If we get an offer out, we can control if we make a certain number of calls. We can control if we analyze some deals. We cannot control the end result of that. However, if we do these things, when we do these things consistently done over time, it puts us in a position to be able to buy these storage deals. So first off, congrats on that. A lot of people listening have never submitted an LOI or a letter of intent, and you've just inspired them to take that massive imperfect action that we always talk about. So you are making progress, you're moving forward, and that's to be celebrated. I want to make sure that we highlight that in your journey. It's not just about the outcome, but it's about the process all the way through in pursuit of this goal and this end point that you want to get to. So now look, I have been here numerous times when a seller hesitates, and there's a lot that could be at play here, right? What do you think is making the seller second guess themselves? They had agreed to a certain price. Now you hear his wife in the background. They're wanting to get a little bit more money. Do you think, well, what do you think is making them second guess? And I guess part B is, do you think it's just about the price, or is there something more at play here? Like, do they even really want to sell this storage facility?
Yeah, I go back and forth on that, and it's tough to tell. I can tell the husband wants to sell. The wife is the one who I think is less sure that that's the right decision.
Okay.
And maybe that's the reason that he's just coming back asking for money at a higher price.
Okay.
That, well, if he can get his price, then it will help convince her to sell. Um,
Let me ask you this.
I don't know.
How many conversations had you had with him prior to this conversation of him being on roller skates, a little bit like wishy-washy? Oh, I don't know. Like, how many conversations had you had with him?
I think I've only had 4 conversations with this seller
Okay.
over the last 3 weeks.
Has his wife ever been a part of the conversation, or have you ever heard anything about his wife being involved in a decision-making process?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Going forward, you won't allow that to happen. So you already know where I'm going to go, but whenever you're in a sales environment, it's super important that you have all key decision makers on the phone, ideally, if and when possible. Now, I realize the reality of it is that sometimes that's challenging to get 2 people on, but it shouldn't be challenging for lack of effort. And I know that you hadn't asked. So one of the questions I always like to ask when I start getting to the point with a seller where I know they're legitimate and they want to sell is I say, hey, Mr. Seller, do you have a spouse or a business partner who you're going to be having conversations with about the sale of the storage facility? Oftentimes they'll say yes. And I'll be like, great. Listen, it'd be awesome, because whenever I'm having conversations about buying a facility, I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And then sometimes I find that the other person might have questions that maybe you hadn't asked, or I just find it really, really helpful for all of us to be on the same page if we're going to work together, so that you can insert benefit. In other words, so that you can, whatever it is they want, sell the facility and go travel and do XYZ, whatever it is they've told you is their motivating or underlying reason for wanting to sell. So make that a part of your process, that you're asking to see and uncover if there's any other important decision makers that are involved in the process. And when at all possible, get them on the phone, making sure that you're on the same page, especially if it's an owner in that facility. Keep in mind that they're going to have to sign on the dotted line as well, unless, of course, somebody has a power of attorney for somebody, but that's a different conversation. Okay? So that's a takeaway for you, to add that to your process, to make sure you ask if they own the business 100%, or if they have a business partner or spouse who's involved in the decision-making process. Now, heads up, many times, especially men, will say, oh yeah, I'm married, but I got this. And then like it gets down to it and they don't got this. They're gonna have a conversation. Not everybody, but oftentimes I've been in that situation. So let's make sure that you're also building a relationship, and that these people any decision makers are a part of this conversation. Okay. Now, I don't know this for certain because I haven't spoken to the person, but the hesitation might not just be about, because what kind of gap are we talking about? He gave you one price, and now how much more is he wanting?
$10,000. It's a small facility, so it's not a huge number, but on a smaller facility, the returns are more sensitive to the smaller adjustments.
You're 1,000% right, brother. Now, if you think about the grand scheme, 10 grand when we're talking about a storage facility is probably not a lot of money. But when we're talking about the kind of purchase price that you're going to be getting this under contract at, 10 grand is it's a little bit of a bigger percentage where it does matter. Now, you've heard me mention this, but like I come from the school of thought that like, man, if 10 grand breaks a deal, was it even a deal in the first place? Yeah. Like, is it already so tight and the deal has no margins or flexibility for future hiccups? So that's something I would challenge you on, and maybe we can get into that on next week's update. But I would challenge you and encourage you to like really sharpen your pencil and look at the deal, because if 10 gap breaks it, if a $10,000 increase in price breaks it, is the price you'd be buying it at, is it already slim? And keep in mind, this would be a wholesale, so you have to think about it from the perspective of the person who's going to be stepping in and buying that deal from you.
Yeah.
Okay, so is the
I don't think
upside
it breaks
worth
it.
sacrificing? What happened?
I don't think that breaks the deal.
Okay,
But I would rather, yeah.
Correct. Okay, so where are you? Like, what's the next step here? Like, what did you end up on from the last conversation?
I'm going to call him back right after we speak today and get the update from the conversation between he and his wife.
Remember something before you do that. Attract, don't chase. Stay a step behind. Don't lean in. Have them lean in. 1 foot out, 1 foot in, right? They need you. You don't need them. And that's the frame and the positioning. And honestly, that's what you need to believe as well. Okay?
You know, it's funny. Ever since he verbally accepted my offer, which he did twice last week, by the way, on 2 separate phone calls, it has changed my confidence so much more in other conversations I've had to be like, it's hard to identify what happened in my brain, but it made me be more direct with one of the other sellers I've been talking to, and like tell him, hey, are we having this conversation or are we not? Because I'm not going to keep chasing you.
Yeah.
But it shows me that as I believe will happen, once I get one, it'll just become that much easier to get the next one.
That's right, man. And look, now I think now's a good opportunity when you have a conversation with this owner to use pull away language and start to regain some leverage in the talks and in the negotiations. And maybe you ask a question like, hey, Mr. Seller, is now even the right time for you to sell? Right? And I think the tonality you use is important. Listen carefully, like bite your tongue, don't say anything. Maybe you consider a shorter due diligence period with some contingencies as a softener without having to raise the price. Maybe you give in somewhere, get something in return, but like shooting from the hip, dude, like you could be like, hey, Mr. Seller, look, I totally get it. It sounds like you and your wife just want to make sure you're doing the right thing. I completely respect that. Believe me. Look, here's where I'm at. I'm ready to honor the price that we previously had agreed to and move forward. It sounds like something has changed for you, and I understand, but I just want to make sure we're clear so that we either move forward or we can part, as friends. And just know that if I commit to something, I'm going to follow through on my end. And, it's not, I would hope to expect the same from you. Is that fair? So that could be a way to kind of frame it. Obviously, you're going to want to use your language and communicate in your voice, not mine or anybody else's. That wasn't a magic script. That was just kind of me sharing how you might want to approach the conversation. But I think it's important that you start to like pull away and have him lean back in. So is that helpful for you?
Yeah, it's a golden. I know you say it's not a perfect script, but like if I could take out those words out of your mouth and put them in out of mine to
no, man, no.
Of that conversation, that would be perfect.
Well, brother, thank you for sharing that, but I'm gonna push back. They're not perfect words that you need. It's less about the words I'm using and it's more about how it's communicated. So, in other words, you can communicate using your words, but in a similar tonality spoken with confidence is going to be more effective than not framing it properly, but using those exact words. So it's more about understanding the psychology of the person you're communicating with while remaining true and authentic to yourself and not feeling like you have to make this thing work and you need this deal. Because when you come from a place of scarcity and need and want, you come across desperate sometimes. And that can be smelled a mile away, and it's certainly not going to help you get the deal. Now, I'm not telling you to be a jerk or a douche and just like be super cocky and arrogant. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. Like, dude, be yourself, but be very firm, direct, and confident. Okay? So look, guys, we're going to put this one to a close here. I look forward to next week's episode where or the next episode, I should say. I shouldn't say next week. The next episode where we hear how things have gone for Dan in terms of tracking his time. And we're going to start to like build out his lead gen system, his follow-up nurture, that we're going to get updates on where he's at with these deals, and tune in to see if he is able to get this facility under contract. We'll get an update from him as to the seller who is now wanting 10 grand more. So look, if you're listening to this and thinking, guys, thank you, because I've been there. I've committed to something and then not followed through, or I've been in a place in my life and business where I knew what to do, but I just wasn't following it up with execution. I want to champion you in this way. It starts with awareness. Awareness is power, and you don't need to be perfect. You just need to start paying attention to where your time, energy, and focus are going. And if you want someone in your corner to help you keep holding you accountable, plug into certain systems and processes that work, I want to encourage you, schedule a short 10-minute call with me. Head over to storagewins.com. We'll hop on a discovery call and I'll ask you some questions and see where you're at and where you want to go. So head over to storagewins.com. And either way, I want to encourage you to continue to plug into this podcast, because if you are listening, I know you have what it takes. Let's help get you to where you want to go. Continue to show up, plug into the podcast. I trust you're getting a lot from following Dan's journey. And if you're new to the podcast, make sure that you subscribed and you check out the previous episodes where we have been building week in and week out. And we've had some false starts, but that's okay. We identify what got in the way. We correct it, and then we move forward. So Dan, any parting thoughts here before we wrap this one?
It's not a perfect path. It's pretty messy, but there's a lot of progress being made. So
that's it, man. And that's where we're going to lean on. That's where we're going to build on. Exactly. It doesn't have to be a perfect. I don't necessarily believe in perfection. Progress is the perfection. Is just building every single day, 1% better each day. So guys, with that being said, Dan, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for showing up. I know it's difficult sometimes to be like, dude, I didn't follow through. I acknowledge and respect you for owning that. And then for recommitting to the process and saying, hey, I'm going to get this done because I said I would, and believe it or not. And I know you believe it. That's going to help a lot of people listening here. So guys, I'm pumped to have you follow along, and I really look forward to our next episode. Take care.
Thanks, Alex.